Hi, my name is Jennifer Carter, and I want to welcome you to a podcast for parents, teachers, and administrators. I chose to focus on those three groups of people because each one has a different, really important aspect in raising children. I've been an educator since 1994, and I started out as a very green, very new teacher in Kenya. I graduated in June of 1994. I was teaching by myself in a classroom by December of 1994. And I went through a really great education program, I have to say, and I felt very well prepared, but there were many things that came up, and I spent a lot of hours talking to other Peace Corps volunteers about some of the problems and challenges that I was having in class. Interestingly, I was about 22 when I went off to Kenya, and the way that the system in Kenya works, many of my students were my age and some were a little bit older. So they kept asking me to marry him and, saying that, when you're done, are you going to stay? And, it was kind of a really crazy experience for a new teacher. And I'm thinking, like, how do I negotiate? I don't want to alienate, but these are my students. How do I draw boundaries? So I really got thrown in. And just had to figure out classroom management and boundaries really early on. And then I came to the United States, and I've worked in a variety of different situations as a teacher. I worked in Upper Darby, Pennsylvania, shout out to all the folks in PA. I worked in Philadelphia, and I also worked in Maryland very briefly. I came out to Los Angeles to work in two private schools, a charter school, and then I also did some freelance tutoring while I was here. So I really covered, oh, wait, I forgot that I also worked at a small community college as well. So I really have done like the full range of teaching from 1994 until 2008. Well, I say I did the full range of teaching in 2008 because that's when I took over my school, which is Oak Tree Learning Center. It's a preschool and daycare center in San Bernardino, California. And it's interesting because I had never thought about moving to San Bernardino, and my husband lost his job, and we said, well, maybe we can buy a business, so then at least you'll have a job. Your job will be the business. And so we literally Googled buy a business, and this place was the first place that came up in that Google search. And we are people who are led by faith. And so we read the listing, and I said, there's something about this that really resonates with me. We were in touch with the broker. We came out and saw it and immediately knew that this was the place for us. I knew, even though we had Googled this place for my husband, just like I kind of elbowed my way in and said, you know what, this is a place for me also. And so I came out and I really started to focus on applying all of the things that I'd learned as a teacher to my experience in this setting as a teacher and preschool administrator. My last job before this, I was an administrator at a private school for about 10 years. And in that experience, there were some really fantastic things that we accomplished. I worked with a team of, when I say outstanding teachers, I don't know if I've ever worked with teachers of that caliber before. But we also had some really rocky times at that school. And just like any school going through transitions, we all handle transition differently. I personally, when I'm going through really difficult transition, I tend to close everybody out and try to work it out in my head. And through that experience, I discovered that wasn't an effective way to be an administrator. I can't exist inside my head because all of the work I have to do involves so many people. And so I really intentionally and purposefully set out to do quite a bit of training and self-development so that I could be a better administrator. And eventually what happened is that we transformed the school, we transformed the curriculum, and I built some really good relationships with people who are still doing the work that I laid the foundation for even to this day. And I brought that here to this school. And really worked on making sure that I had a really good team, that we had a high level of trust, that it was an always, when we say an open door and a safe space, like really creating that and really sincerely and earnestly working to keep that in place, but then also have a really high level of expectation. You know, this, even though we have that shared space, we all know why we're here in the business of getting these children in this area, which faces so many challenges. We know that we have to be here and we have to bring our A game, because there's so many aspects of the lives of the kids here where they're not getting an A game. This may be the only stable place that they come to on a daily basis. So building that in my team and helping us all to realize that we're here all pulling in the same direction really fortified my work experience here in the preschool. I also realized through all of this, because there's kind of a little through line, because I've been a parent this whole time. I had my son in 1998, and he was a whopping 9.3 pounds and 23 and a half inches. So I knew that I was going to have a gigantic son. And we were in Philadelphia, and I was like, I'm going to have this huge son in a city where I love Philly, but there's a high rate of violence. There's some dangers and some things that I have to consider having an African-American son and raising him. And so I really was motivated as a parent to figure out what are the resources I need to be the best parent I can for this kid. And so I set out on that work and used all of the development that I was getting as a teacher to be a better parent. Fast forward some years later, one of his friends came to live with us, and we helped raise him from the time he was 16. And again, you know, you're dealing with a situation with its own set of context and things. And so raising my two boys really made me more aware of what it really is to navigate all of those different worlds. I was a parent who was raising two Division I basketball players, because they both ended up going to college to play basketball. My son Ian recently graduated from Dartmouth in the middle of a pandemic, but that's another story for another time in the podcast. So I had these two boys, but I was a teacher, so I understood the push and pull that happens in the classroom. And I was an administrator, so I understood that you're not making decisions wholly with students at the center of it all the time. I can just be honest about that. Sometimes the decisions that are being made at that administrative level don't really involve the students. And that's not because the administrators don't care. That's because their force is well outside of that administrative bubble that are considerations and that there are pressures forcing some of the decisions. Some of them are great decisions and everyone loves. Some of them are decisions where people look at you kind of side eye, and they should. But this podcast was born out of the friction that exists between all three of those different identities. It is not easy to get parents, teachers, and administrators in a room to have a pleasant conversation that is wholly and solely focused on the benefit of kids. And that's what this podcast is. This is a podcast that is wholly and solely focused on how do we become better parents? How do we become better teachers? How do we become better administrators? Because at the center of it, we care about being good for our kids. And this is a safe space where you can share ideas. There's no question that's too preposterous. There's no challenge that's too great, where we can talk about them. And because I've been in each of those positions, I just offer a different perspective. More like having a fly on the wall. Like, did you think of it this way? Did you think of it that way? What about this? Did you know that this is a resource? Did you know that this is a context that people are making that decision in? And so it's really an opportunity for everyone to hear each other, but in a way where we can actually be heard. This is a podcast for anybody that has something that they want to share. We will take the video conversations and we'll segment them so that as the conversation kind of meanders, then there'll be small chunks for you to listen to. You won't have to sit and listen to 20 minutes of a podcast or an hour, because we'll segment it. We want to make sure that we talk with regular people who are in the field. Some of them have a high level of expertise and may even be experts, but we're talking about things that even they are thinking about. Again, we're not entering the space as this is a you know it all kind of space. This is really an opportunity just for us to be heard and just for us to share. So I would invite anyone who's listening to this podcast to go to www.oaktreelearningcenter.com and click on our podcast with Mrs.C. It says Mrs.C.'s podcast for teachers, parents, and administrators. So if you're any one of those three, you know that that's the place for you. And we really will talk about things that cover preschool, middle school, elementary school, college, and even now I'm in the point where I'm helping my adult children. So we may wander into that territory. But you can send a question to me and we can sit and have a conversation, and you might be able to be recorded so that you can share some of the things that are on your mind as well. This is a safe space, and so we invite people to make comments, but we do regulate the comments to make sure that they are not attacking or judging or making people feel like their perspective is somehow invalid. This is really meant to be a sharing space. And so I would love to hear from you. I can't wait for you to hear the rest of the episodes. We have some really exciting stuff coming up. We have a conversation about raising financial literacy in children. We have a conversation coming up about raising financial literacy in children. We have a conversation that's coming up where we're talking about how to really see kids. We always talk about, we want to be inclusive, but as teachers, how do you make sure you're actually seeing kids and what prevents you from seeing them? We have a conversation about raising children who are biracial or multiracial or bicultural. We have another conversation about how to sneak in math assessment without it feeling like math assessment. And so we have a really, really wide array of conversations that we're going to have. And so I can't wait for you to hear them. And please be on the lookout for our updates. Just make sure that you sign up for our email and you'll get an email every time we have a new episode. So in the meantime, think about what you have on your mind. And again, just send it to me at oaktreelearningcenter.com. Click in the podcast button, and I can't wait to hear from you.